What's happening, everyone? Happy frickin' Monday to you, crypto and the Hex community. Are we up and to the right, or are we not up and to the right? Wow, I can't even begin to, I was talking to Wallace in the green room, and just, wow, all the stuff that's happened in the last 72 hours, even more interesting things that I even thought of. I prepared for this stream as much as I could think of, writing stuff down, the stuff I want to cover, but I just added some more stuff to cover because there's a ton of stuff going on. So I don't know where Funding Jim is. Funding Jim, wherever you are, come soon, and we'll get you in. But I want to get started because we got a lot to cover. Like I said, Walrus is here, one of the best communicators in the business, and we got a ton of stuff to talk about around SVB, USDC, stablecoins, AMA. Get the questions in the chat. Say hi to the chat real quick. Speaking of chat. Scrolling up. What's up, vets? Welcome. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Squirrel is here for the algos. Appreciate it, man. Compassion. Good to see you. Hope to see you again soon. Sweet Aussie. Is that software engineer Aussie? That's what I think of when I see Sweet. Ben Bard. What's up, man? What's up? Good to see you. Good to see you here. Who else? You guys are just having a conversation. Axis is not coming today. Axis, a week or so. Me and Axis will be streaming. Maybe Sloth as well. But I don't know. If he shows up today, he's more than welcome to hop on as well. Especially if, let's see, Godfather J6, good to see you, man. Alan. What's happening? Hex Glenn, Sky B. Without further ado, DJ and Dougie's going to take us in. Walrus, welcome to the show.
What's going on, everyone? How are y'all doing?
I think people are excited, confused, anxious, feeling richer in their pocket. They may have bought Hex. They may have been watching the news all day. Let's start off with that, man. Let's before we get into stablecoins and stuff, just a couple minutes. What the heck is going on, broadly speaking, and then we'll dive into it.
Absolutely. So it only takes roughly $40-50 billion in a banking crisis to finally make the stuff that we're talking about interesting. So I really appreciate SVB and all these people just absolutely ruining crypto for a weekend. And now, hey, look, now we care about stablecoins. So thank you, guys. So just an absolute broad strokes overview so that we can all get some framework. So where this thing starts is actually a little before the weekend, before the craziness, and it's with Silvergate. So Silvergate Bank held a huge amount of different crypto entities, most of the exchanges in the US. That's where most of them moved around and got their liquidity. So Silvergate quietly got closed roughly to the rest of the space. This stuff me and a few people have been talking about for a while. It's a pretty big deal. Here's why Silvergate was important, but you didn't really notice it. So the accounts just got basically moved around to everyone else. So they went to Signature, which we'll hear about in a second, more of SVB. For USDC particularly, most of their custodianship is actually in BlackRock. So Silvergate closes, count shift, world's still okay. Then where this spike really happens is with SVB, which is Silicon Valley Bank. So Silicon Valley Bank has a few issues that we'll discuss in a second, but essentially there's a bank run. And when we say a bank run, we actually mean like the greatest bank run in history. So from the beginning to the end, the bank run was roughly $42 million withdrawn in just around like 12 hours. It was averaging billions an hour in withdrawals. Billions in hours. So if you actually compare this to some of the runs in 2008, this was multiple times the size and an order of magnitude less time. So we are talking, this isn't a bank run. This is the mother of all bank runs. Like this does not happen. It's like sometimes because in these spaces we discuss bank run, that term gets a little soft. Like this isn't a bank run. This is the mother of all bank sprints. Like this does not happen anywhere. So once that happens, it becomes public that USDC Circle has a position there, right? So it's a few $1 billion. So the panic on the market is, okay, USDC is fractionally reserved. So that's when this panic move starts. That's actually not what causes the depeg and the problem, though. This is what's interesting. We got to go back to Silvergate now. So Silvergate ran the Silvergate Enterprise Network, which is the SEN network. So the SEN network allowed most of these different exchanges to move money around 24 hours a day. So if we, again, go a little even farther back, Binance had a crunch over hours and they were like, hey, everyone relax. We're going to have it in the morning. And there is that gap between there. So that's what's really interesting there is this. We got a prequel to this not that long ago when Silvergate actually kicked Binance off and Binance was having banking partner issues. And we saw a mini version of this, but scale of Binance, different partners, it didn't have the same level of effect. And also there wasn't this scare, this FUD coming around with this fractionally reserved. They just weren't able to do the deposits. Okay, so now we're back to where we are on Friday. So we lose our 24-hour movement of funds, right? So there's a liquidity issue. And then we get this spike in this scare. So what happens is USDC is pegged at $1. Why is USDC $1? Well, the first answer is because the liquidity pools say it's worth $1. And the second is the redemption mechanism that makes it hold that peg. So you can mint USDC through Circle and it comes out at $1. And if it's not $1 in liquidity pools, basically what happens is people arb and basically buy things up with USDC to arb it to $1. If it goes above $1, people start to redeem it around. And so you move these things around, right? Excuse me, the inverse of that. So that's why it stays on that peg is what there's a redemption. The problem is if redemptions are off, most of the time it doesn't really move the peg around too much because people still arb with the expectation that, hey, in 6 hours, it's going to be worth $1 again. But because there's this scare of fractional reserve, now people are concerned about the peg and there's no redemption. And that's what causes this spiral to see. So again, just for clarity, what makes this interesting is it's not the fractional reserve that actually causes that problem. It's the scare of that causes the peg to break, but the peg actually breaks because of the redemption mechanisms. So if Circle had turned off the redemptions from Friday till Monday morning and they were 150% collateralized, but everybody had concerns, the peg would still break. So it's not, that peg break is not directly related to the collateral. It's the combination of the two. There's a scare about collateral and then no peg. And that's what causes this big break.
Wow, fascinating. And that's, I wanted to set the stage too to get everyone excited to learn about how actually some of this stuff works. So stable coins, the different trade-offs, the different types. You want to walk us through that a little bit, and we'll get closer to why people use them and how they can be. This weekend, people seem to have used them for arbitrage and other things. I've never heard of investing in a stable coin, but oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff that happened this weekend. But yeah, you want to get off there?
So there's broad strokes. The term stable coins, and this is something for all your hex only people that are looking through this stuff with the, like, is it staking, is it minting or publishing or whatever words we're playing with. So the reason these things matter is because when you look at them, there's the way we communicate them, and then there's a legal framework. So the obvious example I use all the time is ETH, Ether, and Ethereum. I think we may have even said this last time we were on the show. So ETH is a ticker symbol, Ether is a coin, and Ethereum's a network. But if I was like, hey, RHMax, I made 5 ETH, he knows what I mean. If I'm like, hey, somebody owes me 5 Ethereum, he knows exactly what I mean. But if we're talking about a legal framework, those are different things. So the same thing with staking. That term is different than what's actually happening in the code base, but we were using a colloquial term to make it easy for us to understand, right? We put in our stake, and then at some point we get out this yield, right? So how it happened isn't always that particularly interesting to us. The hex code is actually really interesting, but it wasn't technically staking by definition. And this becomes an issue. And this is the same thing that happened with Kraken. So they called it staking as a service, but the service wasn't actually staking, which caused a problem. So with stable coins, the reason that there's this issue is because when we say stable coins, we all think of all the stable coins. But legally in the framework, stable coins mean something specific. So the 3 types are essentially payment stable coins, algorithmic stable coins or synthetic stable coins, and then collateral backed stable coins. So payment stable coins is what most of us would just call stable coins. That's USDC, USDT, BUSD, any of these fiat backed derivatives, right? So they, under the legal framework, the basic idea is it's backed by fiat, it's directly redeemable, and it comes from a central issuer. That's payment stable coins. Then you have algorithmic stable coins, and that's your Frax, Luna, Neutrino, Amplify. There's a handful of these different ones. And that's where they run off these different types of peg to go through and try to figure out how to maintain their price exposure. And then you have collateral backed, which is DAI, although I'd like to exclude it, LUSD. And then one in the future for most of the community will be the Power City guys, PulseX dollar coin. And then obviously from us, USDL. These are backed by collateral, right? And where the difference matters is, one, differences matter. There's a reason there's 3 categories from the first place. There's different risk profiles with these. So depending on what people are doing, they should understand which tool to use. Then the other is when you say stable coins, if you look at any of this architecture from the US, from Canada, from the UK, Australia, all these places, when they say stable coin, they actually mean payment stable coins. And if you go through and look at the definitions, they don't mean all the stable coins that we mean. So things like DAI and LUSD would have different frameworks. So there's a couple reasons. One, we don't want to call those stable coins in the future likely because they're technically not. So that's a compliance issue. The other is if you call something, you're likely to be treated that way, right? So if you keep calling it a stable coin over and over and over and over and over and over again, and then when there's a problem and then you say, oh, hold on, we're not a stable coin. They show you the receipts and they say, well, you've called it a stable coin for 2 years, so we're treating you like one. So those are the 3 types, but that's the reason that some of these words where, again, whether it's in hex or in stable coins, where so many of us have just been like, hey man, like stop babbling, they're stable coins. I get it. I understand. And when we're talking, we don't necessarily go through all the semantics, but it is important that we know those things. Like those things come for a reason. And it's because as these things become more regulated, we want to be more specific in our language.
Absolutely. Yeah. On the hex thing, I guess it's a wait and see what it shakes out to be. We'll see. It's mining officially right now. That's what the website says, and staking portal and all that. But
so I don't think it should be called any of those. Mining is likely to have a soon definition, and also mining, including Bitcoin mining, they've even brought up the possibility of extra taxes associated with the electricity. So what if you call hex staking mining and then they say you're not tax compliant? So again,
publishing it is.
Right. And so now again, that's a really goofy example. And they're going to be like, what, you want me to like give you my phone bill? Like, but that's the whole point, right? That's the reason that we use these specific terms. So if you look at most things, like financial advice is different than advice. Trading is different than insider trading. Like these small differences in terms make a really large difference. So that's the reason I think that we'll want to like really look through and come up with a specific term for the way hex functions. Colloquially, we can still call it these things, but how it's officially referred to actually matters for those things. And I know that, again, for the vast majority, it gets so lost in the weeds. But as we become more integrated and there's more attention from regulators, like those things will really matter and they make a big difference.
Yeah, and it could be that in 2 weeks there's some kind of regulation that comes out that defines exactly what staking is, what mining is, all that stuff. And it could be 6 months from now. So that can have an effect on, the wording, what we refer to it as officially, all of that. So it's like this back and forth game of like, okay, we'll see. We keep hearing it's coming out. I mean, these events keep happening. I wonder how many of them we can have before somebody's just like, all right, just do it. Hopefully it's not just a goofy way of pushing stuff down. You talked about the mining tax proposals that came out recently too. And I hope somebody's up there fighting for us. Peter Thiel, come on, Peter Thiel. Let's get back into politics for us. How about that?
There's a great question from Mark G. Can we snag that one? This is a really fun one.
The PulseX wallet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Mark G. So this is a fun question that one lets me make fun of people I like to make fun of and also bring up some cool stuff. So DAI lost its peg too. Why did it lose its peg? Most of the common answer is going to be, well, it's got collateral that's USDC. There wasn't a collateral call. So why did the peg break? Well, that's because the fun people over at MakerDAO hard-coded the price of USDC into its code at $1. So it doesn't actually reference the price of USDC. It treats it statically as $1. So that means that the price of DAI, its peg, is actually now pegged also to USDC inadvertently through the code, but not the inverse. So if DAI happened to break peg, USDC is fine. But if USDC breaks peg, it pulls down the DAI peg as well because there's an ARB event. So if I can buy USDC for $1 and then mint $1 worth of DAI, I do this over and over and over and over again until those prices fluctuate. And so then they now move lock in step, almost like bonded liquidity, but this is a different style of ARB. So one, that's really dumb. Don't do that. The other, when it comes to the actual issue there of the actual ARB event, is when it comes to the coding side. So the reason that the PulseX wallet took DAI is that you ended up with essentially the same ARB play, but with a much better risk profile. So if I could buy 90-cent DAI or 90-cent USDC, which one do I want? Okay, likely you want DAI, right? So because the pricing is moved down the same, but I have more collateral and there's likely to be more of an event, a slower event, more collateral, more backing. I have a better chance of basically getting my value out of DAI than I do USDC, but I'm getting the same odds, right? So it's like, do you want to take the chance on something that's broken, zero collateral, zero redemptions, or something that's broken but has some redemptions, but I get the same bet, right? So that's the reason that you saw that ARB event. So they picked up a ton of value, and that's the reason they picked DAI rather than USDC, if I was guessing what that wallet owner was thinking. So one, it's really interesting to see bad coding from MakerDAO. That's something to pay attention to. And then the other is, man, what an interesting movement there. And especially at economies of scale where you're talking about millions of dollars. I think someone did the math. I think that wallet picked up like $4 to $7 million from this ARB event.
Yeah, I wanted to actually put that up there real quick, and I'll get Funding Jim has arrived as well. I'll get him in. But I wanted to, one sec. Okay, yeah, I'll put that up there so we can talk. But quick, he's here, the man, the myth, the legend. Welcome to the show, Funding Jam.
Man, these are exciting times.
We've the people have been speaking, and the people have been saying they are confused, anxious, and excited all at the same time. So glad you could.
Welcome to crypto. That's how
yeah.
I literally live like this, 24 hours a day. That's how I am. I'm confused, excited, and concerned. This is just the natural state of being.
Somehow you're able to put words together to help people make sense of it, and that's why the two of you are some of the best in the business. Glad to have you.
Flattery. Anytime have a conversation with Walrus on or off camera is really enlightening for me. I really enjoy his diplomacy, his advocacy. He's not simply a religious zealot or something like that about one particular product. I think he's got a pretty good head about what is available to us in the regulatory space, what has been set as precedents in the past when it comes to digital assets and movement of things that you have property right over. So yeah, I'm really happy whenever there's an opportunity to stream with him. And you as a host, you're one of the more diplomatic and engaging hosts of all of this content. So really appreciate you making the platform available.
Of course. Yeah, you'll never see me do a stream where I'm like, oh, what do you guys want to talk? Oh, I don't know. What do you want to talk about now? I want to value. Value is, that takes prep. That takes getting people together who know what they're talking about to disseminate information. So glad we could all get together and talk about DAI and stable coins and this one in particular too. So this one, and then also, where's the other one where it was, we can talk about this and I'll find the other tweet as well. But I guess we could just pose this question too. What if DAI becomes hex-backed stable? And then, the PulseX sacrifice as the biggest DAI holder. Now, I think me and Walrus were talking about this. It was number 2. Is it number 1 now of the biggest holder of DAI? Is that what we were talking about, Walrus? Number one.
Yes, wow. There was a tweet earlier today, and I think it was TA Engine. I'm sure other people have said the same sort of thing because I got DMs all overnight about like what was happening with the wallet, what was the sacrifice wallet doing. Some people were even like chastising in my DMs about like, oh man, they lost money or whatever it was, right? Because of the peg. And my response, at least publicly, was this is marketing. Part of it is marketing. Yes, I think there was around $7 million in ARB that was made effectively over the 24-hour window, somewhere around 7 million. And, again, there takes some level of confidence to say that it's going to reestablish peg. But Richard has commented, and others comment about, why DAI was a single asset in its origin as far as its backing, and then later became multi-asset. And, there's been commentary also about the level of collateralization, being over and above the dollar spot and backing. To me, yes, there was opportunity, but there's also risk in USDC Sol, or even the Tether commentary that's happened years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. There's always, is it fully backed? Is it one-to-one? What can happen with Tether and so forth. So it was interesting to see Tether surge and people moving out of some of these things like USDC or circle controlled, or, federal government being able to turn off cryptocurrency. You can see it as almost a concerted attack, in my view, against crypto-friendly banks. Some of the leading, if not the cornerstones of these central exchange level banking institutions. The ones that interact mostly with Coinbase and Gemini and Bittrex and so forth. So as far as a coordination against that kind of crypto, which to me is not the same, I could see it, right? And a lot of the narrative that I did a stream today, and I talked a little bit about it with Fu. That's why I was a little bit late. I forgot my time zone, honestly. But it's interesting how many people are engaged now, and they're engaged on Twitter. And, today was, people popping into the room, making their piece. And I don't think it was just their marketing of their own brands. It was actually, concern about what is the moral hazard. What is the moral hazard of basically saying not just 250,000 FDIC for depositors that are mom and pop businesses that still need to operate, and they've still got payroll for 4 to 5 people, but what is the moral hazard of basically being limitless on an insurance policy? What is the moral hazard of basically Fed policy changing what the interest rates are on long-term treasuries? Right, and basically pricing out or causing such turbulence in the banking legacy system, which has basically been a honeypot for those closest to the tap forever. So a lot of great commentary today. I experimented last night with how to record and then basically record and then compress and then re-upload and all that kind of stuff, which is incredibly tedious and computer time processing challenging. So I experimented yesterday a lot, but today it was a lot better in that I did live stream. And what I did with live stream is basically, make it so that you could see who was speaking, as far as their little symbology that they are active speaker, show their content profile. Of course, it is Synergy because it's advertising, the book that they wrote, or their relationship with the Fed, or, their speculation about USDC depegging versus DAI, and all these other commentary that came on all day today, still going on right now. And and during that live stream, also highlighting people that do pop in the room. So if Walrus pops in the room, because I follow Walrus, out of 18,000 people, the top 12 are who I'm going to see. And then the ones that have the highest subscriber count out of the people that I follow, they're going to be next that I see. So It shows the top 12, then it shows me because I'm actively listening. Then the next people that have high subscriber count that I follow are next in queue. So I'm not going to scroll through 17,000 listeners. And I don't think that it actually captures very well when people like Power City and things like that do their live streams. They had 400 people listening today, but all you think is maybe 12 people are talking, right? So I like the live stream content, and I want to be able to highlight people like Walrus that have relevant information, both in the finance space, super knowledge about regulatory, what is a stablecoin and 3 different definitions. I want to highlight those kind of people that represent our community so well. And platforms like this are great because we kind of talk to the choir, and we recapture our religiosity and things like that, which is nice. And I love all the kumbaya, but we have no time. I have no time. Walrus has no time. And to be efficient in our messaging and networking is going to help so much of our ecosystem. So that's my rant about both DAI and Synergy today.
Yeah, I was watching the stream both on the PulseChain Media channel and on your Funding Gym channel, and wow, getting that many people together, and you were talking about before, putting a hex logo in the background or something. highlighting some of the people in our community who know about this stuff out of the thousands of people. It's amazing. I'm glad you're able to put it together. And yeah, it's not easy. It's not even, I remember just recording the screen when I was doing, when Richard came to the Hex conference, I remember finding Jim like to comment that was fast on it. That was really hard to do, to get together really quickly to record the screen, just to do that type of thing, let alone live streaming. So yeah, we definitely appreciate the work you put in there.
And it's so much different, because I think just in the replay it was around 4,000 so far watching 5 hours worth of content. So like the replay is because the hashtags are about Silicon Valley Bank, Patrick Bet-David, some of the speakers that have some kind of, people have curiosity about them. And then what you can do, and I was telling Furu about this, what you can do is when I do that recording, or anybody chooses to do the recording, one is, yes, I have the hex.com logo plus the hex.com URL. That's not obtrusive. It looks appropriate on the screen that's captured. But two is, as a speaker is speaking and they're making some commentary, Rand now, or whatever his name, Rand Man from South Africa, or Simon Dixon, or all these ones that want to be basically commentary about their space, mostly. Those are who are kind of the core that talked today. And then they'll rotate up people that I don't know the names of and things like that. But what I'm getting at is being able to, show context real time was useful, because I'm sure that a lot of people were watching, instead of listening to sound on a Twitter on their cell phone and burning their cell phone up, they can scrub through YouTube content. They can watch YouTube replay double speed. So that'll get more play in general. And, I just want to highlight that I hold my ground. Walrus holds his ground. Everybody holds their ground. But there is a communication talent when it comes to getting them to retweet to their own audience. And those little clips where they look like they are the man, right? They are making the comment that is relevant and contemporary. And, even though it may have other things that you may not like that they have said in the past, what I'm pointing out is it gets to their audience. And when it gets to their audience, because they repurpose that content, their audience learns about Hex or PulseChain or PulseX, or, some of the narratives that we care about in DeFi. So that's really my interest about even being on these channels.
For sure. Yeah. And there's just chat. I'm paying attention. I'm seeing your questions. I want to hold off on them just a few minutes. I know this is AMA, but we're going to get to them. I do want to kick it back to Walrus for a moment to continue on the just setting the framing and the basics for on stable coins. What do you use them for? If if price doesn't go up, why buy them, hold them? Is it LP? Is it de-risking? Arbitrage we saw? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. That's happened this weekend especially.
Sure. So the arbitrage event is actually something you don't want. That doesn't happen all that often. You will see it move slightly, but it really becomes really an event for large players or for something very specific like this weekend. So this weekend is obviously very, very, very rare. It does not happen like that. The biggest aspect of stable coins is to have the ability to move around liquidity, to have the ability to do pricing, to do commerce in these things, to have these things operate more independent of each other. So you don't want something on ETH dragging down Hex, right? As long as ETH is functioning, you don't want it pulling down Hex. So sometimes we get that confused. We're like, oh, these things are in a liquidity pair. They move together. Well, kind of. Depends on the amount of liquidity, right? So if Hex goes up a bunch, it doesn't move ETH because it's such a small percentage of ETH is overall liquidity. But it can do the inverse, where even if ETH is, say, 10 to 15%, it can still have an effect on Hex's price. So these things do matter as far as the way liquidity pools function, and you do want functioning stable coins. And there's a lot to dig through this weekend that'll take time for a lot of people to process. One is most people would have told you that USDC was safer than USDT. That wasn't a bad assumption. They just happened to be wrong, right? So if I tell you that one thing is, hey, there's a 3% chance that something happens with USDC and there's a 15% chance that something happens with USDT, just because the event happens to USDC doesn't mean that we were wrong, right? So every concern that you had about USDT and its lack of transparency when it comes to disclosures on their assets and their collateral backing, those are all still true. Just because something interesting happened to USDC doesn't invalidate the thesis on USDT. So again, in poker, we call that resulting. If you get two aces and you play the hand and you lose to 7-2, doesn't mean that 7-2 is a better hand. Like, that's the math. It happens that way. That's happenstance. So we want to make sure that we're careful about what we derive from the event. So one is be careful, segregating funds, understanding how FDIC works. We can get into a lot when it comes to the legacy side, but specifically for crypto is don't think that we were wrong, right? Like, you can have good process and just still end up on the wrong side of a decision. So USDC had a lot of collateral issues. It also recovered. We got to see some interesting things play out with DAI, but we still want these things to function. So especially with things that are collateral backed, part of the idea is there's different sides you want to understand on the borrowing side, but the first words basically ever written in crypto was a digital peer-to-peer cash system. So the idea of these things was commerce, right? So pricing things in other commodities, again, whether or not you think Bitcoin's a currency, it functions and Curve looks like a commodity. So that's difficult, right? Like, go to the gas station and tell them you want to price everything in BTC when they have a margin that's 10 to 15%, and this thing sit here and waves around them, right? So if you take something that can be collateral backed, you give up some capital efficiency, but now I can price something. And that's the idea. Is if you look at LUSD, USD on the future, they're $1 worth of value derived from something that we care about, that we can guarantee is there. So if you operate on Ethereum, then ETH has value. If you want to use LUSD, it's not $1. It's $1's measurement worth of ETH, and that's valuable. So rather than having to denominate every single thing in the commodity that moves, we can break it down into dollar-sized bits that we can spend. That's the idea of these things to be used correctly. So it's very, very hard to price things in ETH, but I can still pay for them with the value derived from ETH using something like LUSD. So when it comes to these things, it's what are you doing, right? So if you say, hey, I want to be able to go turn this stuff into my bank account. Okay, well, if you're using Coinbase and you're stuck using them, okay, well, then USDC can make some sense. But realize that there's an exposure, so we don't want to sit in USDC for that long. If you're trying to do peer-to-peer transactions, if you're trying to obfuscate from price, if you're trying to provide liquidity, then things like LUSD can make more sense because you don't have risk to what just happened. You could just hold something that that value is more stable and move on down the road and perform these other transactions and price things in them. So even someone who's biased about LUSD and USDL, like, they're different tools. They do different things, right? So use the right tool. If Funding Jim's a big fan of the trust token and the trust dollar. Well, if you're using trust and that's how you're on and off ramping, that token makes more sense now, right? So again, you want to use the right tool. All these things have a place to some degree, and even things that have admin keys or counterparty risk. Again, crypto is one of the only places where we can do things with almost no counterparty risk, but almost everything else we do in life has counterparty risk, and we still perform all those other things, right? So even things like counterparty risk or admin keys or any of these, they make sense with the right risk profile, the right upside. So if I want to go around and buy things here in the US, I have to use dollars, right? It's like, that's not objectionable. Like, I don't have that option, right? But I can minimize how much my exposure is to inflation with all these other instruments and tools. And it's the same thing in crypto. We don't want to get too myopic and say, even if you follow my stuff and think that LUSD is the greatest thing ever, like, there's a reason, there's a place and time to use DAI. DAI gives me an ARB opportunity. Like, what this happened? I'm a fan of DAI now. If I have to off ramp through USDC, if I have to be able to move huge sums, there's all these different metrics where these things make sense, and you just use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah,
and did we
to follow on that? Exactly right. So only on board, off board. That's where I talk about those things that have property rights as escrow, and TUSD is just an example. As far as that existing since 2017, but that doesn't mean that in the DeFi space that's the best opportunity when it comes to pools. Doesn't mean that it's the best opportunity when it comes to someone that's actively trying to trade or something like that. Most of what I care about, especially since learning about Hex and all these other things, are our Hex on Hex return, PLS on PLSX return, that kind of thing, right? Because that's the speculation of this game in cryptocurrency, the use case and things like that. But It doesn't, like Walrus was saying, you know, even though these things may be considered, here's a stable coin, here's an on-ramp tool, here's an off-ramp tool, here's an arb opportunity in stable coins playing against each other in volatile times. You know, it's your belief reinforced by code is what I care about. Dai, you know, people I saw in your comment section, they were saying something about they didn't understand why not USDC and why Dai as far as certain large addresses. Same thing. I made the comment earlier. I think it's marketing and advertising. Yes, there was an ARB opportunity, and it worked out wonderfully for a 24-hour turnaround as far as ROI because of the repeg and things like that. But I think something like 60% of Dai is not Ethereum, that it is other things, right? So like there's a part to me about, does this push forward the narrative about single chain at this moment, Ethereum, stablecoin, DeFi, you know, all the different tool sets that are available inside of the ecosystem that Ethereum allows with smart contract. And most of the narrative that I heard today, even though a lot of them were Bitcoin people, every time that I heard them say something, it would be, you know, the way that they wanted to generate their yield was by basically going into legacy markets, by going into buying corporate equity on a platform that might facilitate cryptocurrency or might facilitate ROI on Bitcoin, right, itself. That's what Simon promotes all the time. And he even highlighted that his losses over the past year of turbulence in cryptocurrency have been because of legacy investments, because he didn't get his Bitcoin back from Celsius, things like that. But his DeFi plays, and he won't comment on what DeFi plays they are, but his DeFi contracts in the most likely the Ethereum network is playing out a lot better than the opportunities available to Bitcoin, because they don't have those smart contract options. They don't have that on-chain, you know, stable position or peg opportunity. So I am ridiculously bullish about Ethereum and the tool sets that they have developed, and more so on PulseChain when it comes to the forking of a lot of these smart contracts that already have been battle tested. You know, Boris talked about LUSD or USDL, or, you know, maybe there's other things that are going to use forks of the liquidity code. That's really, really amazing. That, you know, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up about like what the opportunities will be over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I want to get into a little bit later too, is just their options for stables and PulseChain. A lot of people have been asking about that. But just to wrap up on arbitrage and the stablecoin usage and stuff, I know, Walrus, you mentioned that you might have seen some leverage plays or other arb opportunities this past weekend. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody calm down. I'm about to talk about leverage trading. So this is something where context is important. And a lot of times I actually use B Roots as an example of this, because even though people get into it, B Roots, I actually like B Roots. He's a pretty cool guy when you talk to him privately. B Roots will say, hey, XYZ token is going to go up and do something crazy, right? And those of us from Hex specifically tend to be like one band, one sound, and they're very, very heavy into different things, whatever it is they're into. Sometimes they're Hex only, right? So when they hear someone say, hey, this token is going to go up, for them, they're shooting with a sniper rifle and he's shooting with a shotgun. So he's talking about tons of tokens. So when he says XY thing is going to go up, he's betting on 15, hoping that one goes up 100. That's the way that idea works on this like meme coin valuation. But if you come from our school of thought of a lot of our community, someone says, hey, this thing is going to moon, and they move all their stack into it and then get wrecked. And then they're like, B Roots is an idiot. And it's like, well, B Roots has done very well in the community, but you have to understand thesis when we're talking to each other. So a big example that this weekend that I wanted to bring up, where some people were like, hey, there's an ARB event. They saw the wallets did it for a particular reason. But if you look at a lot of more legacy minded people, there's something that makes that this is important. So people asked, did I think the peg was going to regain? I said, yes. They said, oh, so should I buy USDC? And I said, no. Part of that is because if you have to ask me, you don't understand the risk, don't do dumb stuff. The other is you're essentially risking a huge amount or all of your principal for the peg regain, which at most was 11%. Pennies in front of freight trains, right? This much. Okay. someone who's more legacy and does leverage looks at this trade very, very differently. So a legacy trader is going to probably put leverage, risking less principal, more upside, and probably have a stop loss where they can say, okay, as soon as this thing hits a point, I'm wrong on the trade, I'm going to take the loss, whatever that percentage is. They're exposed less principal. And they also, if say they were 5X, well, they have a 50% gain versus 100, but their downside is still maybe they get liquidated and lose zero. But because of the leverage, they're risking less or risking the same with more upside, regardless of how they play this. So that's a really good example where you have to like understand more of these contexts on these things. So again, so if you asked me, is that going to make sense? I would have said, yeah, of course, it's probably going to repeg for a lot of reasons that we get into the legacy side. But it's a bad trade because what's 10% in crypto? If you just sat in Hex, you'd have done better off. So if you had tried to get cute as like a hexakin, you'd have been wrong. Even if you had made the play, you would have risked principal, picked up percent, and made less money. So this is one of those things where we can talk about like sophistication and literacy, and there's a way to make that make sense. And then there's a way to be risking way too much principal. And for most of us, that's the reason that we went through this. So I think this is kind of a good learning experience of seeing how you could be right in the thesis, very wrong in how you played it, especially if you're a hexagon, because then you could see how the R didn't overtake what you would have made just holding it. And so I think there's a lot to kind of learn from that idea there. So one, this is a rare example where leverage trading would have made sense, but in general, Spike just nailed it. Like, don't get cute. Like, don't be silly. Like, don't risk huge amounts of principal for the idea that you're going to get a bunch of backpats and say, ooh, look, I caught the ARB event, how smart I was, and stayed strong for you. No one cares, man. You picked up 10% and risked your stack. Like, even if you were right, that was a bad play.
To comment again about the DAI play, if you bet on USDC repegging, you are all in on Circle and CBDC and the narrative that banks control what a USDC is, or the admin key of a crypto. Whereas on DAI, you're betting on some percentage of that for sure, because part of it is multi-asset and part of it is significantly is USDC. So part of it is the same narrative of risk. But the other side of it is you got ETH bros. You got ETH bros that started out with a single asset DAI product that has gained some stablecoin Lindy effect over the past few years. And you're kind of hedging if you're going to be in one of those properties, one of those as a quote unquote stablecoin. And then when it goes to the other thing, I think maybe I'm probably not current on what liquidity is available. I know that Jesse, Ask Jesse highlights often the liquidity value as far as market cap or what is available there. And I'm sure that Walrus, maybe if he hasn't already commented, could say that as well. And whether or not it loses its peg, whether or not it breaks peg because of the value of Ethereum. So during the day, I think earlier in the morning today, when the streams were starting with Mario's channel, maybe I checked and Ethereum was around high 1400s or something. And then later in the day, it was in the mid to high 1600s. I don't know where it's at now. But you started to see a little bit of the echoing from the crypto people saying the Fed has to respond by not increasing interest rates. They said that they're going to turn it up until it breaks. That kind of narrative, and now they've broken something, right? And then you see some of the politics, starting to try to push narratives during the day, Squawk Box and things like that, making commentary about what percentage of deposit holders or businesses gave to one party versus another, like a 4x on Democrat versus Republican kind of party contribution. So you start to see the politics play out on two things. One is this Occupy Wall Street? Is this 2008 happening and banks are getting bailed out as crony capitalism? Or is this, still the people speaking through Reddit and through cryptocurrency that somehow, still push the perception of price? So yeah, today it was really, really interesting. Yesterday was great too, and I'm curious what's going to happen over the next 3 to 4 days as this plays out even further.
We are going to get some movies, documentaries. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like just individual things that you can really expand on. So like for the idea on like FDIC and backing depositors, there's a natural idea of like, we want to make people whole, and those things make sense, but economies isn't this, like I said this responding to Gammon. I think Gary, I think you liked it. Like the economy doesn't exist in this world where there's a bunch of levers where you can just pull and one thing happens at a time. Like we can see this through a ton of things in the current economy. So you want everyone to go to school, so you give access to huge amounts of funding to every student. And what happens to the price of college? It goes through the roof because you just broke the pricing controls, right? So it breaks, right? You have healthcare, and now you try to get everything where it's insured, and now there's a huge spike. And so you break incentives. Like that's not, I don't want to get too meta here, but so people can, like, if they're not that financially like astute, you break reality. Like you start to actually change things where like there's an actual cost to something and an actual benefit. And if you start to add all these things, you start to change how those things really function. So the reason that Yale and any of these places didn't charge $80,000 a semester or whatever it cost, no one could have paid it. But if you make it where everyone can pay it, they have no reason to be competitive anymore because you broke the pricing control. So the same thing with healthcare, and the same thing happens in banking. If you make everyone whole and no one ends up paying the price except for, extraneously taxpayers, I have no reason to not be risky anymore. Oh, so if I break this thing, you guys pay for it. And if I hit and win, I get to keep the money. Cool. Shuffle up and deal. Now I go back to the casino and I turn up leverage and I push every constraint that I can. And I get aggressive on what my collateral levels are and what my deposits are and how much is cash versus bonds and the length of bonds. And I just get really aggressive because there's no downside for me anymore, because you guys are going to come pick up the bill, and you break the incentives to be reasonable. Right. And try to get out too much of a rant. The other part about that is then you break competitiveness. So if RH and Gary want to actually play by the rules and be safe and do sound things, but I get to be super aggressive because I've got the Fed backing me up, or because XYZ is going to bail me out, or because I think there's going to be a bailout. If you want to go to either of them, you get a 3% return, but you get 7% from me because I'm dialed up full tilt with no resiliency and no way to bounce back from any of these events, because I'm just trusting that I'm going to get backstopped. So then they either lose because they're uncompetitive, or now they have to turn up the game as well and be aggressive. And you can see this from all different kinds of game theory. But this small idea of, hey, we'll bail things out is much more than just we're going to make things whole. You break so many different parts of incentive models and controls if there's not risk, right? If there was no risk in crypto, everybody would have every dollar they had here because it could go up a bunch, right? So if every time you caught 1,000x, you kept it, but every time you went to zero, RH covers your bill, and I say, hey, bud, I lost $5,000 a month trading this month, and he sends it to me, and I just wheel and deal again, and I make $500K, and I never have to pay him back. Again, you just break things, and these things just don't happen in isolation. Like there's no isotopes in nature.
Yeah, there's so many parallels.
This is actually what breaks societies because it becomes socialist and communist. And I don't say that as a lightning rod. It is true. You disincentivize actually refinement of talent. You disincentivize focus of purpose. You disincentivize because there's this quote unquote equity of outcome, that everybody has the same. So if you look at examples in time, like Russia when it was the USSR, yeah, correct. It was the most land area, the most natural resources in the ground, the most heavy metals and oils and arable, being able to be food productive, things like that in the 1950s and 60s. And you have a different country like Japan, and Japan has almost none of those things, has almost none of the land area, it has population, but it has almost nothing that it can export. It's a net importer of goods from the world. And yet they were able to focus and create technologies that were exportable. Knowledge was exportable because of the meritocracy that their society developed in a capitalist system. So the resource that they had wasn't invented yet. It was technologies. And then if you look at the exports to other countries outside of Russia or USSR and Japan, how many Russian products have you bought in the past 20 years? And how many Japanese products have you bought in the past 20 years, right? So having the resource of free education, everybody gets the same middle level of education, then there's no incentive for exceptionalism. Everyone has the same base resource of a black Model T, and no cars are differentiated, not by color or not by performance. There's no incentive to create something that's new and different, right? Because even if you did, society as a socialist system or communist system would take that away from you, right? Because you need to be equal to your neighbor. So like the capitalism has been the net benefit to human society since its concept, you know, and its concept probably goes back 100,000 or 200,000 years. You know, as a tribe discovered that flint was a better material to make stone axes out of, it had a competitive advantage, right? So there's all kinds of reasons that these, you know, oligarchical systems, crony capitalism, or, you know, socialism or communism systems break. And it is because you need to have the moral hazard. You need to have the destruction that results from the moral hazard of people having privilege.
Yeah, there's a ton of parallels to, you know, first thing that comes to mind is, you know, people on welfare calling an ambulance when they get a cold or just need something simple, that being a drain on the medical system, and just like this spiral of, you know, them creating more people that are, oh, I want to grow up and be an artist. Oh yeah, because I want to draw a check. That was the joke when I was a kid. So unfortunately. Anyways, Red Bear or Red Bull Green Bear said this question on for a while, and I think it's a good one. Question for you both, including Gary. Now, I want to move away from USDC ever again. What is the best stable to use to buy Hex? It's a cow swap limit orders with the least slippage, most liquidity for the price. What do y'all got on that?
So I can let Walrus go because he'll talk mostly about pools, I think.
Yeah. So it depends on the length of time. So you don't necessarily need to make another swap. So part of it is whatever's easy that you're onboarding through. So if you're moving in from like Binance and BUSD is simpler. If you're going to set a limit order and you have a limited time frame, so like if you're setting a limit order and you're just like, hey, I'm trying to capture the day, essentially, like you're just DCAing in using a limit order for order execution, then it's less important because you have less exposure. And sometimes slippage gets into some people's head too much. If you're moving in a couple of grand, you're not going to get slippage on any of these things. It doesn't matter to you. So that's not meant to be the grade. It's just do it simple and easy, and don't try to get cute and listen to some of this extraneous arguments. Like if you're moving in $5,000, set a limit order so you have good order execution, so you don't get MEV-bot attacked, and everything's nice and simple there. So whatever's simple, the longer you're going to go, you can, again, I'm going to lean on LUSD. So there's plenty of liquidity there. And the other is sometimes people when it comes to order execution, you don't have to have that much liquidity directly with the pair you're looking for. So LUSD's primary pair is USDC and Hex's primary pair is USDC. So even if LUSD and Hex do not have that thick of a pairing, the router is going to run it through and you don't have much of an issue. So you can use, especially like if you're using a good DEX aggregator, Matcha, 1inch, CowSwap, any of those, you can use your preferred method. So again, so for example, if I was like, hey, I've got 20 grand, I'm going to move it in, I'm going to hold it in crypto, and I'm going to DCA in, I'm going to set a handful of limit orders. That's something where I'm going to move in on whatever's easy, where I can minimize fees and all this type of onboarding issue. Then I'm going to swap into LUSD because I'm going to say that, hey, I'm going to have a couple of weeks of exposure here possibly. And then I'm going to set my limit orders where I want. And because LUSD will route through without you having to do it in any of the Uniswaps or whatever DEX the aggregator goes through, you can just use LUSD and you'll get perfect order execution.
And the second part of the question I posted as well, just he kind of elaborated, but yeah, funny, Jim, anything to say on that?
When you have a longer term horizon about how long you're going to be invested in anything, your on-ramp, off-ramp doesn't make as much difference to me. Your stablecoin position doesn't make as much difference to me. Surely you want to exit. Like I rotate between real estate and usually it's cycle instead of swing. I don't even do really swing trading. So like if I say, I'm looking at a property, I want to buy an apartment building. It has, this amount of time where I need to show in the bank account, I've got source of funds of 90 days. It's been sitting in there, as 90 days. Then I'll look at like what Walrus was saying about setting either a limit position or something along those lines. And as it gets eaten through, just because I want timing later, to have access to that capital, and then I'm going to have a 90-day wait while the purchase of a property occurs. And then maybe even after that, 4 to 5 months, as far as it being tenanted before I can rotate out equity again into crypto. Like I'm looking longer term, most of my crypto experience. And so your stablecoin position or your, for Hex's origin story, a lot of the liquidity was tied to USDC. And it was simply, and in my view, is because most of the people that were participating in it were buying it off the shelf, and they wanted something that they could relate to that was USDC dollar narrative, right? Yes, it's called a stable coin when it's Tether, and it's called a stable coin when it's DAI or LUSD or these other things, but they were foreign in the mind of the person that onboarded through Coinbase. They onboarded through Coinbase. They had a familiarity of that their wire equals this amount of money. The price familiarity gave them some sense of stability in cryptocurrency or what their value of their bag is worth, things like that. So I think that a lot of the tie over the origin of since 2019, 20, and 21, tying so much to USDC was partly because of that familiar for the retail to participate, right? And then now it's gotten more sophisticated in its balancing because you have other things or its pools, other things, whether it's Hadron or other fairly large liquidity pools that give you some idea of price. And you have more educators about what is this stablecoin, what is cryptocurrency, what is DeFi, what is Hex, what is PulseChain, all these other things. Because, in 2019, the people that were commenting was Richard. And outside of that, there was Telegram. And then outside of that were a few people that came on Twitter. Like now we have a lot more understanding as a community, and we're better educators across the board and I think that allows for diversity about what is stable paired with the asset that you're looking to climb.
So just scrolling through to talk to the chat for a minute and hit up some questions. Sorry, chat, I'm way behind, but for scholarship, when I'm in the quarter position next time doing jumping jacks. It's a reference to what we're all feeling this past few days in crypto. Appreciate you, Astro 369. Yeah, I try to bring them. I bring them here so they can school us. What's up, Monica? Good to see you. Let's see. Scrolling again, chat. I'm starting from the top because I want to make sure people, when they ask questions, they get at least. I can't get to them all, but I'll get to me if they can. Let's see. From Nicola Hexla, does anyone know if V3 will have a fixer bot run so we'll see the real liquidity? Yeah, what do you all got on that? Any guesses?
So it will run on V3. The reason that it's a little different is because with Uniswap V2, you can just drain the pool and get the ratio correct. Where you have to be careful on the fixer bots is when it comes with V3 is because they're running ranges. So what they'll end up doing is basically setting parameters on what the width is on certain tokens it wants to do, because where you'd have a problem is if I set liquidity for Hex at $150 and all you did was run the fixer bot, it would grab that buy at that height, and then you'd be able to game the system. So what they'll end up doing is, they haven't disclosed it for good reasons, but they'll take pricing plus or minus some range on most assets. So they'll still be able to get a lot of that liquidity out of V3. And it's just once it's applied, it'll be in PulseX that'll be symmetrical. So, back to Uniswap V2.
Yeah, I've been wondering about the gaming, and not so much that I want to take advantage. I just want fair play on the launch, and I think everybody wants to feel like they got a fair play launch of PulseChain, PulseX, those two. And I understand what Walrus is saying about people can game a system when they do know that they can set liquidity pair as a new pair. and be the AMM basically, or the fixer bot basically give them an advantage. It's going to be interesting, but like I still I don't know if it gives me less confidence to say that a test net occurs, people get to play with the UI, they do all of the things that are available in PulseX. Maybe there's a single side staking option in protocol instead of only validating and things like that. As far as people generating PulseChain on PulseChain return, through validating or some single side stake kind of protocol. And same thing with PulseX. But like, I'm also apprehensive about engaging and not having the fixer bot run where I know how the pools are going to play out when it actually goes live, when there's actually a launch and we have a window. So do you have commentary about that, Walrus? Like, do you have, if you could only choose one, do you want to be in the blind or do you want to be in the know?
Blind, only because we always are going to assume that more is going to go on than what really does. So for those in the space, we looked at what was going on with, what are all these whales going to do during the sacrifice? They're going to try to hold the price of Hex up super high, get their TWAP and then bring it down. Much less happens than we think. And then we get we get the one death candle that people remember. So because they have that spike moment that we think that there's more that went on than what really happened. Same thing with PulseX. There's always that buy the rumor, sell the news, where people assume that once it comes out, there's going to be this explosive, reaction positively or negatively. And it's almost always less than what we assume. So I think you run it blind. We trust those guys to have it within inside of range. It's going to be an imperfect science no matter what you do. And less people will be able to game it to less degree than we ever assume in general.
Well, I think there's an open question too and I believe RH is talked about this. Okay, we want to empty most of the liquidity pools. We're not going to be able to get them all. What happens? How does that affect the pairs, the coins, the adjustments, the fixing? How does that affect it if we get 90% of all the stuff with the fixer bot, but not the other 10%, for example? Is that something?
Some people will make more. I mean, there'll be some people that snipe and see that there's a liquidity pool that didn't get tapped. And they'll find that ARB opportunity, and they'll either stay in the system or they'll exit out into Ethereum and have to buy back later when prices ratchet.
Yep. Yeah. Whatever you miss is just going to cause ARB events. There's going to be all these ARB plays regardless. The thing that you would kind of hope is that you would hope that the people who are taking the time to write those things are also going to participate in the system. So hopefully you see more of the people who take all these opportunities are people who are trying to gather value and then engage with the chain rather than, whatever you want to call some of these other networks that would come in. So while you do want to minimize those for yourselves, make sure you're not the one having all that value extracted. Overall, it'll probably just end up with, a lot of value collection from people who care about the chain.
Question from BR asks, Walrus, what are the chicken bonds for LUSD and liquid loans bringing them to PulseChain?
No. So chicken bonds, for those that don't know, it's a little simple on the top, but it's a rather complicated protocol where they take a derivative BLUSD and they use LUSD in a combination of liquidity providing in a few different places and the stability pool. It causes some sell pressure in places that we don't like. And if you look at the overall performance so far, it hasn't been that spectacular. So there are some risks associated with it. It's something we keep an eye on. I like Bryce, some of the guys from Liquidity that have set it up, but there's merit to it, but I just don't think that that's the best way to execute some of those things. So we'll either have either in the future, ourselves or someone else will build something better, or the Lindy effect will be around and I'll get proven wrong, which I'm fine for. But when we look at stuff going on in PulseChain, one, I'm relatively risk averse for new stuff. I want my stuff to work. Like, I'm okay being wrong, but I don't want my stuff to break. And then the other is I want what's normal on PulseChain to be massively better than everything else. So, funny, Jim brought up earlier that people use USDC because, it's $1, right? And because they came from Coinbase. Well, if people come to PulseChain and they use PulseX and LL and all these things the community built and USDL because that's what's normal, they don't have to necessarily understand all these value props that those of us that have been here for years are to take advantage of those things. So what's normal is really important to me on PulseChain. So that'll be something to further look at in the future. But as of right now, it's nothing we're in a rush for.
Gotcha. Got a question from Monica here. Coinbase is my go-to. Not so sure now. It's a better alternative. I know we're going to talk about TrueUSD as well, and Fun Gems, as you mentioned earlier, Waller's a big fan of that. But Coinbase alternatives, what can people use?
So if you're in New York, you don't have much options on a lot of those things. So you do what you got to do to play the game. For those that have a little more options, again, none of these things are perfect. They all have their issues. But in general, if I have to pick one, if someone, twist my arm, I default to Kraken simply because they tend to have the least amount of issues. They are still in the U.S. jurisdiction, and I'm a big fan of Jesse Powell and the way he tends to speak about crypto on the whole.
Did you see the clip that B Roots put out of Jesse talking about locking up your Bitcoin to earn? Did you hear that? Because he was part of the Twitter space with Mario hosting, and I think Tone Bays was asking a question and Jesse was answering, and he was saying, that bank malfeasance is because you can buy a 10-year treasury and basically always still be liquid. You could always sell into the market without actually being locked to 10 years. And so he was explaining how wouldn't it be great if there was something that you could lock up in contract and actually hold its value. And Tone had, because he was explaining this about Ethereum, but Tone had said, well, I've never touched Ethereum. I don't like Ethereum. Is there any, I don't even understand what you're talking about unless you're talking about Bitcoin. And I think Jesse said something along the lines, and B Roots is one that retweeted the clip, that, if you could earn for locking up your Bitcoin on the time lock. I was like, how do you talk about Hex without talking about Hex?
What a revolutionary idea. Do you guys know what to do with that?
Hashtag Bitcoin Hex. Hashtag Bitcoin Hex.
Yeah, look
Amazing.
at B Root's Twitter, and he's got the clip, but I may clip it out later also and record and just make it more Hex centric. But yeah, pretty cool.
So in the chat, what's the name of stablecoins when in reality they aren't stable? Finbear says, digital dollar laid you in jail.
A little bit, yeah.
It's not stable. Again, everyone likes to talk about what its purchasing power is over time, and that is because of inflation, superinflation, hyperinflation, whatever you want to call it. When I was a kid, I'm not that old, but I'm older. 80 cents was a gallon of gas. Buying McDonald's or something as a teenager was $3, something like that, for a $3 dinner. So yeah, references sneaks up on you on what is stable. And if you call it the dollar, some people that like history know that the dollar has had like 5 versions or 6 versions. It's just called the dollar. And even other countries reference the word the dollar, in their own, like Singaporean or Hong Kong dollar. But if you look at the United States, it used to be measures of metal. In the Constitution, a dollar was a certain amount of silver. And you have other versions of dollar from, in the 1930s when FDR basically confiscated. And it's another thing that I kind of get an issue about. I'll come back to the topic about Bitcoin gold. But dollar in the 1930s was different because you couldn't hold metals of your own that would be redeemable for even coupons, which are the dollars, redeemable for metal because metals were illegal in the 30s. 1955, I think, is when Bretton Woods. 1971 is when off the gold standard altogether, going to a OPEC kind of petrodollar. So yeah, even the word dollar in its backing, and then it's full of faith and trust in the government, basically as far as what is a dollar. These are all just concepts. So when people say, how can stablecoin be stable? What people want when they say the word store of value is to say, if a television or, a manicure or, groceries cost this amount of my labor per week, right? Because it gets converted into labor gets converted into a currency. Is that stable? Am I still trading time? Is it time that I'm trading? Is it innovation, invention that I'm trading? What am I trading? And it's just the reference point as far as unit that we call dollar. but it's not stable either.
And this thing comes down to like measuring locally, right? So if you look at the whole of the dollar, then we can explain how it's, you know, a bad store of value. But if you look at how well it's worked, again, obviously there's a lot of layers of complexity. It's been pretty good money, and it's stable enough that I can still do commerce in it, right? So when it comes to stable coins, how many times has USDC broke its peg? A handful of times. And even when you look at what a depeg is, move 10%. What's 10% in crypto? So it's pretty damn stable, right? And the whole point is, it's the idea of stability isn't to have a straight line on a graph. It's to be stable enough to perform transactions, to be able to be used as a median of exchange. And in that case, it's more than stable enough. It's these externalities that are a problem, not its ability to maintain stability.
Can you highlight also, I think Jesse is the one that made the tweet about the only thing that, you know, as far as the movement off of, I think is it called LUSD? Is that what their stable is called? That came to 99 cents or something like that as far as a reference. But the only reason is because gas in this turbulence made it expensive for just the gas. So there's probably a delay about redemptions. Can you comment about that?
Yep. So again, this comes back to the idea of like, what's stable and why do you want stability? So if you look at it, the redemption times got slow because less players wanted to redeem because the gas was so expensive. So that's the reason you saw some of that depegging. But again, you want this idea of stability, but again, for most people to perform most actions, even if it does trend toward $1.02 or hold at 98 cents, again, we weren't worried about losing 1% or 2%. We were worried about Bitcoin or ETH or these things moving 10, 20% from the time we try to decide to move value in to the time we tried to assign it to a trade, to purchase something else, to move it out to whatever it is. So the LUSD peg moved off of its peg because of the redemption time. And again, the idea is, though, you can see why you could actually be the one who is redeeming and take advantage of that. It's all on chain and the participation is equal versus USDC, where you weren't sure if the peg was coming back and you're not able to play the same game.
Can you throw on screen, Ben Dubard threw a question for the panel about PulseX SAC address. It's maybe 10 from the very bottom. Maybe this is good commentary. So complete speculation, just guesswork on my part. I don't think that that's true. So the question reads, does PulseX SAC address, being the largest holder of DAI, indicate a potential attempt to create parity between eDAI and pDAI, which would be Ethereum DAI and PulseChain DAI, I'm assuming, through cross-chain liquidity providing sense once PulseChain is live? In my opinion, no, nothing to do with creating a parity narrative. If there was any use case, like I said earlier in the thing, I think it's marketing. It's hard to ignore the elephant in the room about the largest wallet holds DAI, about how it held its stability relative to USDC as a stable coin. To me, it's advertising. And then when the repeg happened, it was profit, as far as even a narrative of marketing of 7 million in profit. I think that was pretty cool. Now, the OA or SAC address can do absolutely anything it chooses to do with that. Maybe it wants to buy an island from Richard Branson or something. Who knows? It may have no service whatsoever, no benefit to any sacrifice or anything to do with PulseChain whatsoever. I would say that if someone else was playing the game and they were saying a different kind of promise, they might have use for the capital. And the capital in a different scenario altogether could be something along the lines of, now that there is a launch of their blockchain, there could be a pool potentially to reinforce something like the fork that Walrus does, or the fork of things that they care about. If the underlying asset is PulseChain in that scenario, or the underlying asset is a different L1 in the hypothetical I'm talking about, there could be a reason to have a parity and have a reference, whether it's in DAI or just a transition of economic energy to be part of the marketing launch of a stable coin. I like a lot about the protocols since I've learned more about them of liquidity forks. I think that they're really pretty cool. Because it supports the narrative of decentralization, supports the narrative of validator, supports the narrative of equal play for equal participation. It supports the narrative of a dollar reference My only challenge is when it comes to oracles. And I think Walrus can highlight, what percentage of risk Oracle may offer in these different narratives of stablecoin. Because right now, the Oracle for USDC was, what does Coinbase say and what does Joe Biden say? That was the Oracle. And in code and protocol where the rule sets of the game, the people that set the redemption are the people that decide to hit the button to redeem in these liquidity protocol forks. So can you comment a little bit about Oracle, and is that a real risk vector, or is it a small percentage of the consideration for this as a stablecoin?
Yeah, absolutely. So first on the question, I don't think so as well, and I'm disagreeing with RH here. So make sure that you value that on how you take the advice here, because betting against RH is statistically not worked out very well for many people. But I'm big on being intellectually honest, so I'm still going to put my opinion forth on this. That pairing and the idea of parity between these assets on the two chains has never made much sense to me. I don't know why any of these things would be priced the same. They're different things. Like, just because the coding is the same, like, is Hex on ETH the same as Hex on Ethereum? No, for a variety of reasons. And to me, the same answer is true on PulseChain. So Hex is one that, particularly because there's such a sharing of values and the idea of PulseChain, where all that comes from, it makes more sense with that particular asset. But why would I even want them to be priced the same? Like, one of these things is 3 years in market, one of these doesn't. One of these is on a chain with hundreds of millions of users. One of these is a new network. Like, we can say, like, if they do come out to be priced the same, it could just be essentially like a valuation to me where they landed the same, but that the math is different to them. So the idea of that we're going to pair these things together, that was never something that I thought really held much water in the way that I would want to do things. And I would caution people from trying to just pair these liquidities of these different assets together, especially for something like DAI. But again, just for context, like, that's something that I'm very contrarian on. So again, I'm going to voice my opinion, but I would default to the big brains and RH and those guys.
Well,
comment about Oracle? About
yeah, absolutely. So with Liquidity actually uses Chainlink and then has Teller as a fallback. And so there's a variety of ways you can implement oracles correctly. So Chainlink is more centralized than I would like, but it has held up very well. But similar to USDC, we kind of see the failures that can happen. So USDC uses, Chainlink uses a multi-sig that is roughly 4 of 9. The problem with that is, if you can't even say that it takes 4, because you don't know that one person doesn't have all 4 keys. So it's a multi-sig, but it could still just be one person. So the idea there is that oracle is still a risk. Now, Chainlink also backs up Aave and a dozen other of the biggest DeFi protocols. So it's ran very well. It's very battle tested at this point, but it is centralized and it does have a central point of failure. So it's not what we leaned on. We decided to go with Teller's infrastructure. With Teller, there's a few different things that make it very clean. One is anyone can be a reporter and anyone can input prices. That's the first part. So when you look at the reporter network from the Oracle, there's not a Oracle, there's an Oracle network, and Teller's Oracle network functions relatively similar to proof of stake, where everyone's a reporter, they can put out prices and you can call out another reporter for a bad price. And there's a process that you go through where token holders and other reporters can dispute pricing and go through these things. There's a delay on pricing that you can change per protocol. So you can adjust, even saying we use an Oracle, that can be different for protocols. So a recent one that was a very bad implementation of one was it's Bonk BNQ. I have no idea what their stuff was, but they had an Oracle failure, but it wasn't a failure of the Oracle. It was an absolute terrible job coding where there was no lead. So if you have no delay and there's a wrong price, there's no dispute period. So it ended up just being an Oracle that was essentially an admin key. As soon as someone reported a bad price, this thing broke. And that's not the way it'll be implemented on liquid loans. And it's not the way it'll be implemented by anybody programming something properly. And so with something like LL, this isn't something that needs lightning fast price upgrades, like say the New York Stock Exchange, where you're talking about Ethernet cable algorithm battles, right? That's something where that bandwidth and that pricing update needs to be hyper fast. For us, we're basically making sure that 10% from 110%, that 10% buffer and collateral is never exposed, and so that you have proper liquidations. So you want that to be fast, but it doesn't have to be 1 second, 1 second, 1 second price update. So we can have a larger delay there to make sure that that pricing is smoothed out, because this isn't about sniping liquidations. You would rather have a more resilient price structure that miss a liquidation or two than have failures that can cause cascades and big issues. So it comes from using proper oracles and then proper structure on coding to make sure that those things actually are resilient along the way. So both of those make a big difference on making sure that those things are overall resilient. But for all the lip service, oracles can fail. That is an attack vector. People do need to understand what that is. And you can just disagree with me, right? Like I've got a well thought out opinion. I can explain these things. We can look through, but it's fine to say, hey, that's just not something I want to do. I want to participate with another thing. But again, I think that when applied correctly, that's very, very small attack surface compared to most of the things and many of the things that we already engage with. So I think it's a great way of doing things. But again, understand, look through this, know that there is attack surface there, and then we can all make our own judgments.
A couple points on this too before we go to TUSD. So speaking of the stablecoins on PulseChain, so 0x Coast, CST stablecoin, fiat on-ramps, that's an area as well. And then RH, if RH were to make a stablecoin, what would that look like? Would it be, backed Hex? We saw the tweet earlier, DAI backed by Hex. Is that even an interesting idea based on this stuff? Like, what do you all think about those two things?
No,
Hex is a bad collateral for all the reasons we like it now. Low
right.
liquidity, it's volatile, it goes up a bunch, it goes down a bunch. And even the price structure on it is, the fact that Hex went down the percentage it did isn't because Hex is bad. It's actually because Hex is good, because the people who sold the bottom and actually pushed that bottom down were long-term stakers who were up a ton of money. So if you look at that price, Hex went down 90% if you just measured top down. But if you look at what actually happened, was what that chart is telling you, the story it's telling you, is that thing went up an insane amount. And because people were staking, everybody who got to sell 30 plus cents got to sell at unreasonable high gains. And then what it's telling you when it gets to the bottom is that Hex is so good that if you do the things that it is prescribed in the ecosystem and staking, that you can do everything wrong, have poor order execution, sell the bottom, and you can still be up hundreds of X. And then that action gave everyone else the best entry that was possible, where because a handful, really two, because two whales took a huge amount of profit and are now wealthier than when they started, you got to come buy it under 2 cents. And like, that's how that thing works. So all of those beautiful things about Hex's price action that we love are why it's terrible collateral.
So what would be, if RH were to do a stable coin, would it be backed by DAI, ETH? I mean, I guess what are the options?
My opinion is and again, I've not sacrificed for anything other than PulseChain, PulseX. I'm not a participant when it comes to liquid loans or Power Cities liquidity forks that they've developed. I can imagine that after there's battle test of significant economic energy through those, and code has been reviewed, and there's the comfort that the underlying asset of the L1 token itself is what's being redeemed and hoarded. It seems like that would be something that RH would probably support. I don't know that he would launch his own or anything that as far as his own glory, but he has in the past said that if other people build things that are built well and serve the public good, then he's not just looking to compete just for his own brand stamp. He has said things along those lines in the past, that when he gets to something, he will get to something, but hopefully someone will build a platform, for this, that, or the other. And it seems like, and again, just outside of the LL liquid loans narrative, I've been more harsh than any. And I think also Walrus gives great caution about loan, leverage, risk, all these other kinds of things, because liquidation events are part of the protocol model. Like that is part of how it supports stability for a stablecoin narrative and how it awards liquidity providers for the protocol itself. So like there's a lot of caution I have about its use case by people that use the protocol to extract value. That's just my own, avoidance of leverage. But in general, I can see a reasoned why a liquidity fork that uses the L1 token would be supported by RH or OA. Just leave it at that.
And where does CST, what coast? Very ambitious project. The fiat on ramps, they seem to be very serious about it, though. What do you think about that? Game changer? Wait and see. Opinions on Coast's project?
I've asked in the past what limits, and it may be country by country as far as onboard, offboard limits, conversion into using it basically as a fiat bridge. So if you're coming from one nation currency into the ecosystem of cryptocurrency and then you're exiting back out, it depends on their banking relationships as far as I understand. And I don't know that they're doing the same as TUSD in an escrow kind of company versus some other kind of money transmitter licensure and things like that. They seem to have gotten permissions from quite a few countries, at least what Zero Coast has published, and said, hey, this country and this country has been added to the roster. But I honestly don't know enough about the function of or the limits both on or off as far as fiat to crypto conversion.
So I don't want to sound like I have a ton of inside baseball, but I've had a few private discussions with them on some of the mechanics, and I'm just not sure what all they put out just yet. So I don't want to overstep and overshare. And Christian always says, talk out of school. So I won't talk out of school. But I do like what they're doing. I think the model is very, very positive. Something that he did said that really stuck out to me, and I think is very on brand. He basically said, I don't really care if Coast is successful as long as someone's successful in doing what he wants to do. So he basically put it out that, hey, if someone launched a Coast light product and there was a fiat on ramp and everything was good, he was fine. He could care. He is building something to add functionality and infrastructure. And that says a lot about him and his character to me. So I have a lot of faith in the limited time that I've spent with their team. I think they're good guys. I think they're going about things the proper way. And having that fiat on ramp is important. Having multiple stable coins is very healthy for an ecosystem. So I've seen limited where people brought up that is our stable coins competitive? No, not at all. I'm glad they're coming. I hope they keep building cool stuff. And regardless of when anyone ever competes with my stuff or anyone else's narrative, there are not enough smart people in the world doing cool stuff. I'll take each and every one of them I can get on the chain. I don't care if they disagree.
Well, yeah, shout out to Stoic. Rhino? I think that was Rhino from the Coast team. Again, very serious.
A couple of good guys.
Yeah. We hope they're successful. I think, again, ambitious project. From what I've seen within the last year or so, they seem to be putting a lot of pieces together. Weight is another token they have. We'll see how that plays into things. So it's, very, very interesting guys and dev teams. And hey, people are building some amazing stuff with this ecosystem. So we like that. We hope people are successful. Last question, and we'll move on to TUSD and wrap up here. Hex Hoarder, if I want to set up a multi-sig wallet ASAP on PulseChain when it launches, any ideas?
Yes. Blow up safe, or what Gnosis, what is now safe. DM them until they finally get back to you so that I can finally communicate with these guys. I've been trying to get stitched back up with them to do some things. So we had to set up multi-sig contracts for ourselves and LL. But it takes a lot of time to basically keep the front end up for users. So we've considered doing a few different things there, but we don't want to offer that as a product. I would love to be able to get the safe guys now that they have a token to come on, adopt the chain. They have to do limited work. I would love to have those guys support. So As of right now, there's not a set option, but if you want to help out with the community, do some legwork, find a way to get those Gnosis guys to answer and get myself or any of the community members that you feel comfortable speaking on the project, get them in a room with them so that we can try to win those guys over.
Here's, I'll take this one real quick too. If I want to take profit on PulseChain before the bridge, is there a stablecoin that will be there?
There's no, it depends on what you mean by take profit, but you can't exit the system. So there wouldn't be a native stable coin there yet. So you'll have to hold whatever your assets are. Then once the bridge is open, you'll be able to have probably wrapped USDC and wrapped DAI over there. So once the bridge is open, you can move over, but you're talking about, 24, 48 hours.
One more comment I'll take from Johnny Chaotic. I would expect the OA to support anything that's not directly in control over. Pairing DAI could be unnecessary risk of minting or bug occur to threaten an entire guess. Yeah, any comments on this from either of you?
I think that's a fine take by Johnny there. I try not to comment too much on the OA stuff. A lot of speculation there.
Cool. Nothing from Fun and Jim. We will move on to TrueUSD. How much do you know about TrueUSD, Walrus? Have you used it before? Any experiences?
Limited. I don't have the ins and outs of it that Fun and Jim does. I have a few different ways that I tend to off ramp, and I don't actually off ramp all that often. So when I tend to do it, it's in larger stays. So I have a little different process there.
Yeah, I was just doing some research with it. The last couple of weeks, we had a community question ask about, hey, I can't find anything on TrueUSD, and that's actually what spurred this stream. Was let's talk about that, and kind of led it to stables and perfect timing for the market stuff. But yeah, Funny Jim, you want to talk about TrueUSD? From what I've seen, you basically sign up with an account, app.trusttoken.com, verify your email, enable two-factor auth, do KYC AML, and then you mint and redeem TUSD. You want to explain maybe the process on that?
Yeah, I sent in private chat the links, but basically in 2017, when I came into the crypto space, in March of 17, every few weeks I would hear about someone that used a credit card through a website, and then their account for their checking account or their mortgage or their car loan would be closed because there was some scrutiny about clawback, about buying these risky assets. And it was always accompanied with a letter from the bank saying, we want to protect you by preventing you from participating in cryptocurrencies. Thank you, but we don't want your business. So Bank of America was doing it. Other accounts were doing it. MasterCard did it, all these different things, right? In 2017 and 18 in that bull. And then the concept of stable coins on chain, things like that started to come around. I don't remember USDC, but I guess it probably existed in 17. I thought that I was just directly buying Ethereum back in 17, but maybe I'm wrong. And the difference about the onboarding and offboarding, both for when I talk about cryptocurrencies with peer group, is they go through a KYC. It is an escrow company network. So it's not a single entity. It is a network of around 1,000 entities, including real estate companies that deal with escrow all the time, title companies like Chicago Title, or high dollar escrow accounts that handle classic cars, or they handle the trade of businesses. Basically you get financing, you buy a dry cleaner from someone that wants to sell it, things like that. So your escrow services. Escrow handles trillions and trillions of dollars of trade just in the United States every single year. So, I like the SIC code, which is basically how a company is registered as an LLC or C corporation, how basically when you send or receive a wire, it goes, some of those elements are highlighted on the wire from your bank institution. And when they look at something that is in 17 or 18, it may be legal to transact with a marijuana dispensary in California because state law says it's legal trade, but it is limited in federal, especially federal banks. So examples like Denver, Colorado, the state of Colorado has permitted trade in legal trade in dispensaries and all kinds of different products related to marijuana. but they can only use state banks. So they have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. They can't go into federal systems because the charter of the federal bank says they can't, right? So I like escrow for a few reasons. One is because the SIC code of a central exchange for many years has been on a highlight list. As far as the nature of the company, what is it? What is a central exchange in cryptocurrency? And sometimes that's a gray zone. So some banks will decide that they don't want to do business with you anymore, and they'll close accounts. The SIC code of TrueUSD or Trust Token is escrow company. So I have to prove where the money came from when I'm onboarding. It goes from my checking account, and my taxes and things like that are always available for review and scrutiny and all that kind of stuff. And when money comes back out from cryptocurrency, if there's profit or loss, it's just easier for me to bookkeep, and it's easier for me to comply, basically. So it's not necessarily the same perception by banking authorities when I'm going through that path versus a central exchange like Coinbase or Bittrex or Gemini. They do have resources that are, like I said, escrow, so it's effectively a bridge. On one side, you can see the balances. It's not very high by comparison, to what has been minted in Tether or been minted in Dai or in, might be in liquidity pools across different ERC20s even, right? So if you see an LP of TUSD paired with Hex, you may actually have more slippage because it'll have to do more routing to get you what you want through other stables even, or through other coins. So I wouldn't say that it's for high volume tons and tons, because it actually is money vaulted, 100% audited, 1-for-1 collateral, mint when a wire comes in, burn when a wire goes out to your account, kind of a bridge. It's a bridge more than it is an exchange. So I like it for a lot of different reasons. The risk profile, however, is also a trade-off. The trade-off is you can have a lawsuit, and it can attach the escrow that is held at the custodian of the company. So you could get sued, and if you get sued, that is an asset that's on the escrow side. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But I care about it because I tend to shield things legally through LLCs as far as property management companies and things like that. So it depends on your purpose. If you're just trying to have a quick onboard, you don't mind sometimes 7 to 10 days wait for money to hit Coinbase or Gemini and be available for you to trade it or transact, then some people just might be more comfortable with the USDC route of onboard and offboard. And maybe they want to deal with Coinbase Pro and not have transaction slippage and have someone else hold your keys and things like that. But what I love about TrueUSD is when it's minted, it lands in your MetaMask. It does not land on their platform, and then you got to do a secondary transfer to get it to your MetaMask. It is directly in your MetaMask. It is directly out of your MetaMask, your hardware wallet. It is in your custody the moment that it is minted. And when you send to basically burn or redeem, it is no longer in your MetaMask, and within, I think, 4 to 5 hours, you'll see it on your bank account balance ledger. So I like that it promotes custody. It promotes self-custody. I like that it's a bridge instead of a central exchange. I like that if I onboard or tell people about it, they don't see 200 games to play in the casino of crypto. So there's a lot of reasons why I like it as a stablecoin ramp.
Yeah, it definitely is that something? Can people use that as a, Monica was asking earlier about Coinbase alternative. Is it just the app? And like you mentioned, you just go there, connect your bank account, mint, redeem, burn, all that stuff, and it just faster than Coinbase? Would you kind of, I guess, would that be the summary of the benefits of using it?
Far faster. It's far faster because it's not as much of a, at least in my experience, I haven't used a central exchange in like 4 years, something like that. They're always available. They're always like, you should have more than one route in or off, right? And from crypto, you never know what would change. They do have their compliance rules. There are property laws that are different than making a deposit into a bank account, that doesn't mean that that's your money anymore. It's now their money. Making a deposit on a proxy bank like Celsius or BlockFi doesn't mean that it's yours. You've seen that evidence play out. However, when you do escrow, it is yours until it is the trades are basically complete. So there's just more protection in general about property rights through a bridge. And again, it does offer a little bit more risk to you as well, because those things can be attached. Like you could get a lien against your asset. You could go through a divorce and the escrow element could be attached. So there's certain things to consider in general, but you can always route once you've gotten in through TUSD system. You could go to Tether, you could go to USDC, you could exit, and comply with whatever the rules are on your other exit point, should you choose to, be in a stable, be in Bitcoin, be in Ethereum, be in Hex, whatever it is, as we move forward in cryptocurrencies. So it's up to you to know your best hedging, your best systems. And I just happen to like this one.
Gotcha. Fantastic conversation, gentlemen. I'll just throw one more comment up here in case anyone's heard of it. Newton in Canada. I don't know if you all know anything about Canadian on-ramps, but it sounds like there's something that Funkmaster Hex is familiar with. No exit fee on MetaMask. Okay, interesting stuff. Do you all think that there'll be? Is this the rise? After everything that's happened this weekend, is this the rise of fiat on-ramps, new stable coins? Is it just regulations coming? Maybe each one of you, whoever wants to go first, take us out on what all this means. What do you think is going to come from it? Don't everyone jump at one time.
8 Ball says, I have no idea.
Where there's a couple of things that I can just kind of comment that I think are very interesting. So I've kind of, again, been like, hey, guys, like this is going to be a battleground. I've been talking about this quite extensively for a while. There's been some of the writing on the wall about the jockeying for position on these things. And RH just commented on this, but for those that don't know, who think stable coins are boring, they've made like $2 billion a year in yield on these things. So I would love a boring business that paid me $2 billion a year in yield. So if anyone knows of another one, hit me up in my DMs. We'll sign up for that one as well.
Hex.com, save yourself.
There you go. Right. If only Bitcoin had something like that. So I think that we're going to see more and more battle for market share. And I think there's two things. So this is going to start with things that we see in stable coins where there's larger players coming in, battling for market share in ways that we're not used to seeing in crypto that make a lot of sense in legacy. And then where I think that it will be more directly affected to some people is things like liquidity providing, where there's arbitrage, flash loans. We tend to think about ourselves about all the benefits we have over legacy, but we don't really talk about the players in legacy. And if any of you have ever interacted with real high end, not traders that we make fun of, but like analysts, people who actually work at a lot of these high end financial systems, those are not stupid people. They are extraordinarily good at what they do. And there's a reason they get paid what they get paid. And there's a reason they work where they do. And as this space gets more sophisticated, the hey, there's a new token, I'm going to provide liquidity. We're going to see how sharp the sharps are from legacy as they come in. And we're going to lose a lot of edges and a lot of these weird cases where there's a lot to extract. So I think what we'll see in stable coins is going to be interesting, but most of us aren't going to go compete with those things. So for what's impactful is I think people are going to see that more and more really sophisticated people and more scripting comes in and starts taking the place of a lot of the point and click that we're seeing in the space now. And the other from that is we've seen in other markets where when they get higher levels of sanctions or they get pushed back, where they move into things that are harder to sanction, whether it's metals or crypto. We've seen this with Russia, and we've seen some kind of inverse things recently where the more they sanction Russia, the ruble actually got stronger. These things don't always move quite the way you think. And in general, up until what we've kind of seen in this little microcosm here, stuff that's bad for the stock market's bad for crypto. It's bad for the overall market. It's bad for crypto. But here, something bad in the market happened per se, and it actually pushed people into certain aspects of crypto. When there started to be a few of these other like Wells notices go out, liquidity got a bump. So at some point, these systems become good enough, usable enough, transactable enough that things from legacy don't hold down crypto. They push things into crypto. And maybe we're starting to see we're not at that point altogether, but I think we're starting to see some of that inflection where if you close down certain parts of my banking or any of these things, like I have crypto alternatives. And so I think that we are starting to see some of that where if you keep making this experience less and less valuable, then you lower the barrier to entry in crypto. So I don't think that this is the end of this. I think we'll see a lot of jockeying. I think a lot of smart people are going to come in. But also, again, I think we're going to see some of this counter trade to where things that are negative in the main markets don't have that same effect on crypto that they would have historically.
Gotcha. I'll throw this up there right before we get to funding Jim on the closing too. What about BankX? I've heard a lot of people talk about Bank. Any opinions? Do you all know anything about BankX? Either one of you?
I know that they were going to launch something, and they were talking maybe a year ago. I heard a lot of tweets around the same time that, PulseChain is only 2 weeks away. And I haven't kept up with anything to do with them whatsoever. I just see them on the How to Pulse list of people going to build something, but I really do not know anything about the game theory or the founders. I don't think they've engaged the same with the rest of the community that are known.
All right, Walrus. Sounds like you're not familiar.
Not in a positive way, so I don't want to interact with them too much.
All right, that's good enough. Good enough. Funny Jim, take us out, man. What last thoughts? Final closing stream stuff. Future bright, future fire, future.
Yeah.
What's future?
Zig Ziglar. You can have anything you want in this world if you can help enough other people get what they want. Like, I'm not saying that you should be a simp and you should not hold your ground and you shouldn't, hold your beliefs near and dear. You should establish and define yourself. You're part of a community. You're part of a movement. It's amazing. It's a fantastic, thing to be participate. I do want to get all of us. I'm hopeful that we learn terrific communication skills like Walrus represents so well, you represent so well, that it does engage the audience beyond the mouthpiece of these Twitter spaces, these YouTube channels, these in-person meetups. I think that there's so much potential for a lot of the leaders of different products and projects to rise and be on stage and impact, mom and pop in Kansas that know nothing about crypto right now, right? So I'm really excited about a lot of the wonderful things that our community has brought to bear. It's amazing. So there are opportunities. I'm highlighting it in these Twitter spaces. If we allow people, and again, it's hard because this hexagon thing that I believe in, sometimes I just want to troll. Sometimes I just choose violence. I'm like, yes, you're so wrong. You're so wrong from what you said 6 months ago. And there's such bullshit that you're saying right now about some of the talking heads, right? But also I realize that their audience doesn't know that. Their audience doesn't know that 6 months ago what they said was complete bullshit, right? So I don't want to close off the message to their audience by having them gate the information that we can present in general, right? So when someone has a pretty big influence or impact and they are talking in these spaces, I engage with Simon Dixon and we have turbulence sometimes, but I'm still going to praise him on some of the things that are aligned with crypto principles, right? Even though there's a lot of things that I challenge. BitBoy, sometimes he is a positive force about his messaging. It sneaks through every so often. His representation, sometimes it sneaks through. And I'm hopeful that he stands up to be an even better leader in the future. But I realize I can troll him and I can have his supporters shut off all hexagons because I have it in my Twitter handle too, right? And I care about hex, but like I'm trying to, do the kung fu of diplomacy. And I think people like yourself as a host, bringing people on that have counter position, understanding the diplomacy of allowing someone to be able to exit out of their painted corner sometimes has better use than trapping them. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is I'm promoting other brands. Doesn't mean I'm not super hexagon and super RH and super everything about crypto. I even changed the header of my Twitter handle recently, and it's got Kiyosaki, and Richard doesn't like that Kiyosaki sells books. Okay, fine. He doesn't like he sells books, right? And Richard and Kiyosaki talks about silver and as a savior or gold as a savior, and I don't believe that. But like, I still want to get to that audience that has some heritage around some of these other speakers, and me promoting the things that they do well and rewarding in public the things that I believe that they are saying well, and then holding that chastity or chastising for private is probably a better talent set for me and for all, I think. So that's kind of my exit.
Are we going to see a funding gym doesn't read messages or check email in your description anytime soon?
At the end of this bull market, I'm either going to live on a quiet island in a hammock and just screw all this stuff, but this is right now. This is just like, these are purpose driven. Again, the age group that you're in as a man kind of changes your, I think it changes your view. When I was in my teens and my 20s, it was all about violence, competition, fighting with each other, determining who's alpha and all these other things. So you take a lot of risks in your physical life. Maybe in my 20s or 30s after I was divorced, it was about dating and conquest and all those kinds of things like that. That again is kind of this statement of your manliness. But like our role really in our 30s and 40s and 50s, if you don't have children that you're really doting on, it is about like community building to me. It is a role of diplomacy and showing not just in a braggart way that you survived all the wounds of your previous life, but like enabling other people to realize they can do better, that they have opportunity right in front of them and they don't realize it. So building better leaders is a better role for diplomats like all of us.
For sure. Yeah, I think that a minimum bar in the community that I think people should strive to is, hey, if you just leave the community in a better place than when you found it. If any of us disappear one day and we go off and buy the island or whatever it is, at least, hopefully people could say, you know what, they gave enough, they did enough, they created enough value, they had enough utility, they helped us, and that's okay. They can do whatever they want with it. But I think as a minimum bar in the community, if you're trying to find utility, trying to provide value, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So both of you gentlemen are experts at providing value. Walrus Funding Gym, where can people interact with you, find more about you, all that good stuff?
So I've got the Walrus Official on Twitter. It's going to drop here in just a couple of days. I did a really cool podcast with Jeff Kerdakis from TrustSwap. I'm recording another one tomorrow with a couple of really cool guests. That will drop later this week. It's the Weigh In with Walrus podcast, spelled like with 2 L's. And by the way, the fact that everybody puts the second L means a lot to me. It's a super silly thing, but I actually love that everybody does it. I actually really appreciate that.
I don't know how to spell walrus anymore. I thought it was always 2 L's, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the podcast. And I'm going to skip the liquid lunch space this week. We've gotten more and more in the community doing really, really good spaces. That was the reason I was doing them. Famous and a few guys did good ones. And then they were doing 24 hours. And they were like, we want some more structured ones. So then I was doing the structured ones. And I just try to basically pivot wherever I basically want to have an example set and more people will pick it up. I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff, but somebody who loves one of these things will do a better job. That's classy. Thanks, Spike. People will do a better job. Sometimes once you have just kind of a layout. So I try to just basically go wherever I think there's value. And then when someone picks up the mantle and is doing as good or a better job, I just go find something else to do. So that's part of the reason for the podcast. So if you're thinking about doing a podcast, awesome. Go do a really good job. And then I'll go find something else to do with my time and I'll keep moving around. So the podcast is really cool. I just dropped a teaser. They can find it there. Obviously any of the LL spaces or website or Telegram, they can always get a hold of me there. I try to be very, very visible and help out. So Walrus Official on Twitter, Weigh In with Walrus Podcast, / anywhere, Apple, Spotify, any of those things. And I'll try to be wherever I can do cool stuff and help out the community.
So on mine, there's 2 G's. We like this double letter. There's 2 G's in funding, Jim. And everybody likes to call me JIM, but I'm Gary. I'm doxed. I'm on Twitter.
Good God. I think of GG. Good God.
God, you can find me. I recently changed it to make it a little bit easier for people to see the other accounts. One of them is doxed. And I think I had put in August of whatever months ago, however many, 7 months ago, 8 months ago, that was 30,000 USD, 10,000 1 year, 10,000 2 year, 10,000 3 year. And that was market purchase. That links over to that other Twitter account, which is me. And I saw today that that's now worth 58,000, I think. And I'm going to start doing for people that are streaming regularly, at least as far as like trying to help their brand. Definitely, they're not getting any money. But like I did a stream with Crypto7 recently, and I asked him the question. I said, out of the 3 products that are 2 of which going to come when PulseChain launches, Hex, PulseChain, PulseX, choose a number less than 1,000. And that is both the dollar value and the length of time that it would be single side staked. So Hex has its own staking mechanism inside the protocol. PulseChain is either going to have validating as an option as a ROI option, or it will have possibly a protocol that is built into being able to single side stake, some opportunity maybe in PulseX. And PulseX similarly, there's all these other things also like the liquidity forks and things like that that can potentially single side stake. So what I'd said was, if you're creating content consistently, and I think of you as a touchstone for the community, then choose a number under 1,000. That amount will be dollar market bought of one of the 3 things that you like, and that amount of time. And then as I make content over the next 2 to 3 years, it'll always be referencing that stake. It'll be saying, oh, this is the Crypto7 stake. And Crypto7 was March 8th, and that was $777. The market bought Hex for 777 days. And now that's worth $1,100, I think, just because of price performance. So like, I want that as a reference point, and I'm willing to, dox that address and myself, because it helps me with onboarding a lot of the real estate people I deal with all the time. So if you want to participate in that and you're someone that's already been known in the community, then at least I'm helping with the branding of your, reference. It's not your money, but it's your reference. So something to keep in mind. Twitter, I'm only on Twitter. You can find me, the same spelling across all social media platforms. There's a lot of imposters. There's a lot of fake letters, that spells, it's not an I in funding. It's something else. It looks like it's me. I get DM'd constantly by people that say there's an imposter trying to DM. So please always confirm. I'll never ask you for any kind of money. I'll never ask how your trades have been going. None of that kind of crap. So that's always an imposter. But Funding Jim, just find me on Twitter. Not him, the real Funding Jim. Exactly.
I think the last time I had you on, we were talking about the real Kiyosaki and different branding around that. And it reminded me of that when you said that. So.
Yeah. And also people should be thinking about it. If you've been in this for 3 years and you have, like, one of my friends is Crypto Weekly Review. And I tell him about this all the time. He's got a YouTube channel that's one call sign, a Twitter that's a different call sign, an Instagram that's a different call sign. It might be worthwhile to consider rebranding and establish all of those same spelling, easy to remember, difficult to misspell, difficult for fakers and imposters to throw a Cyrillic letter in there or whatever it is as far as a keyboard thing. And it might be worth it if you're going to try and represent the community to do that land grab, that digital land grab first, and then do a pivot. And then everybody knows that you're all one thing, because If you put Funding Gem in Google, the whole page is just Funding Gem. Nobody else is an imposter because it's only Funding Gem on Instagram and Snapchat and platforms I never used, Twitch and things like that, because I grabbed all those things. And I think people should consider that if they're really going to do branding over any significant amount of time. But anyways, that's my bit.
Yeah, everyone, these two gentlemen, I definitely follow them. I get a lot of value out of their Twitter and YouTube content, and definitely go follow them on all the platforms. Don't usually do 2-hour streams. This one was totally worth it. I appreciate both of you being here, going through all the rigmarole with us. What's been going on in the market, stable coins and PulseChain, and amazing, exciting stuff. Wealth and knowledge. Really appreciate both of your time. And chat, again, go follow them, smash all the buttons, do whatever you want, and go have dinner, go to sleep. Walrus looks like he needs a break. He's been staring at that microphone for 2 hours. He's like, oh God, please let me go home, please. But appreciate everyone. That being said, we are out.